During Christmas dinner, when the family was exchanging gifts, my daughter handed me a thick envelope with the words, "You'll like this." I opened it, and inside was her husband's $250,000 debt. "The money is needed before New Year's," she said. I smiled and said, "Sure." But a plan for revenge was already forming in my head. When my daughter came back for the money, that man was standing next to me, and when she saw him, she screamed in shock. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Christmas carols drifted through my Austin home as I settled into my favorite armchair, watching my family gather around the tree. The warm glow of lights reflected off scattered wrapping paper, creating the perfect holiday evening I'd been looking forward to all week. Tommy sat cross-legged on the floor, still tearing through his presents with 16-year-old enthusiasm. "Grandpa, you've got one more gift coming," Melissa announced, her smile too bright as she approached with an envelope. Something in her tone made me set down my coffee cup. "You're going to love this, Dad." The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Official. Not the usual Christmas card weight. Mark shifted uncomfortably on the couch, avoiding my eyes entirely. After 35 years of reading people in business negotiations, I recognized the signs of someone hiding something significant. "This isn't an ordinary gift," Melissa continued, perching on the arm of my chair. "You'll love it because you can help your family." The papers inside weren't greeting cards. Investment documents, loan agreements, numbers that made my vision blur for a moment. $250,000. Mark's signature scattered across multiple pages, along with names I didn't recognize. Official letterheads from private investment firms. 250,000? The words came out quieter than I intended. That's quite specific. Melissa's confidence wavered slightly, but she pressed forward. "Mark got into trouble. One investor will sue him if he doesn't return the money. We've been hiding for a month." The Christmas tree lights suddenly felt too bright. I could hear Tommy's excited chatter fade as he sensed the shift in atmosphere. Mark finally looked up, his face pale and drawn. How long had they been planning this moment? How long had they been waiting for the perfect opportunity to corner me? "Hiding for a month," I repeated, letting the weight of those words settle. They'd known about this debt since before Thanksgiving, before our family dinner last week, before every phone call where Melissa asked about my health, my business, my plans for Christmas. "You could have asked instead of demanding." My voice carried the chill I'd perfected in boardroom negotiations that went south. Melissa straightened, her smile becoming more forced. "Dad, don't be difficult. This is family. We help each other, right?" The envelope crinkled as I set it on the side table. Mark opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. The silence stretched until Tommy's unwrapping sound seemed deafening. My grandson glanced between his parents and me, confused by the sudden tension. "By New Year," Melissa added, as if the timeline made the demand more reasonable. "We need it by New Year, or the lawsuit starts." I studied my daughter's face, searching for any sign of the little girl who used to climb into this same chair to read bedtime stories. Instead, I saw a calculation, entitlement, the assumption that my money was somehow automatically theirs when needed. "Absolutely," I said finally, watching relief flood Melissa's features. "I'll certainly think about it." She leaned over to kiss my cheek, already moving toward Mark with satisfied confidence. "I knew you'd understand, Dad. Family takes care of family." But as she turned away, she missed the cold smile that touched my lips. Oh, I understood perfectly, and I would indeed think about it very carefully. The relief in Melissa's eyes lasted exactly as long as it took me to stand from my chair. Something in my movement, or perhaps the silence that followed my agreement, made her pause near the tree. 35 years I raised you to respect people," I said, my voice carrying the authority that had built 3 successful dealerships. "And you come to my home on Christmas with an ultimatum." "What?" Melissa spun around, her confident expression cracking. "Dad, what are you talking about? I'm asking for help." "Asking?" I picked up the envelope, letting the papers spill across my lap. "This isn't a request, Melissa. This is a business presentation, complete with documentation, deadlines, and consequences." Mark finally found his voice. Mr. Clark, I know this looks bad, but the startup needed additional investments to reach the next funding round. The projections showed. Stop! I held up a hand, never taking my eyes off my daughter. You lost someone else's money on your failed project, and now you're hiding behind my daughter? Melissa's face flushed red. Don't be dramatic. This is family. We should help each other. You have more money than you could ever spend. That's not the point. My voice grew colder with each word. The point is that you've spent a month planning this ambush. You've been calling me, pretending to care about my health, my Christmas plans, my loneliness since your mother died, all while calculating the perfect moment to corner me. Tommy quietly set down his remaining presents and slipped from the room. Smart boy. He could sense when adult conversations turned ugly. I do care about you. Melissa's voice rose, her gestures becoming more dramatic. But Mark needs help, and you're being selfish. Selfish? The word hung in the air like a challenge. I've given you everything. College tuition, down payment on your house, seed money for Mark's first business venture. How much of my selfishness have you enjoyed over the years? Mark shifted forward on the couch, desperation creeping into his voice. Sir, the AI startup had real potential. The market research showed massive growth potential in automated customer service solutions. We just needed more runway to attract Series A investors. Runway? I repeated the startup jargon with distaste. Is that what you call gambling with other people's money? How many investors did you sweet-talk with your projections and potential? It wasn't gambling, Mark's voice cracked. The technology was sound. We had early adopters showing interest. The timing was what? I stepped closer to him. When exactly did you realize you were in over your head? Before or after you took Victor Stone's money? The name hit Mark like a physical blow. His face went white. You know Victor? I know Victor Stone quite well. I watched understanding dawn in Mark's eyes. Did you think Austin's business community was large enough for your name not to get around? Did you imagine I wouldn't hear about my son-in-law hiding from creditors? Melissa's confidence finally shattered completely. You've known? This whole time you've known? I've known about the debt for 2 weeks. What I didn't know was how you planned to handle it. I gestured to the scattered papers. I never imagined you'd choose manipulation over honesty. The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of Christmas lights and the distant sound of dishes clinking as Tommy busied himself in the kitchen. Melissa sank onto the couch beside Mark, her face a mixture of anger and shame. So what now? She asked, her voice smaller than before. I looked at both of them, seeing clearly for the first time who they'd become. Now? Now I'll think about it, just like I promised. The silence stretched until Melissa found her voice again, though it carried a bitter edge I'd never heard before. Fine. She stood abruptly, smoothing her dress with sharp, angry movements. I'll come December 29th at 4 o'clock. I hope you'll get over yourself and think it through by then. Her words hit me like a slap. Get over myself. As if my reaction to their deception was somehow unreasonable. As if questioning their methods made me the villain in this scenario. I'll think about it, I repeated calmly. I promise. Mark rose from the couch, his movements uncertain. Mr. Clark, He glanced at Melissa, then back at me. I never wanted it to happen this way. Goodbye, Mark. The finality in my voice silenced whatever apology he'd been preparing. Melissa grabbed her purse from the side table, her movements sharp and efficient. The careful Christmas presentation was over. No more pretense of family warmth. Come on, Mark. She headed toward the front door without looking back. We're done here. I remained standing in the living room, listening to their hurried footsteps in the hallway. The front door opened and closed with more force than necessary. Through the window, I watched their car back out of my driveway, headlights sweeping across the lawn before disappearing into the Austin evening. The house felt different now. The Christmas decorations seemed somehow ridiculous, cheerful reminders of the family gathering that had just exploded. I walked slowly to the dining room, where our abandoned dinner plates still sat on the table. Melissa's wineglass bore a lipstick stain on the rim. Mark had barely touched his food. I began clearing the table, stacking plates with methodical precision. The familiar rhythm of cleaning helped organize my thoughts. 35 years of fatherhood, and it had come to this. An ultimatum delivered with Christmas wrapping paper still scattered around my feet. "Grandpa?" Tommy appeared in the doorway, his young face creased with concern. "Are they always like this?" I paused, holding Melissa's half-empty wineglass. "Not always, but more often lately." He moved closer, helping me gather the silverware. "The money they want? It's a lot, isn't it?" "It's substantial, yes." I appreciated his directness. At 16, Tommy often showed more maturity than his parents. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." He folded napkins with careful precision, mimicking my movements. "Dad's startup failed, and now they want you to fix it." The simple truth of it struck me. That's exactly what they wanted. Not help, not a loan with terms and conditions. They wanted me to fix Mark's mistakes and make their problems disappear. "Grandpa?" Tommy's voice was quieter now. "What are you going to do?" I looked at my grandson, this young man who'd chosen to stay and help clean up rather than disappear when things became uncomfortable, who asked direct questions instead of dancing around the truth. "I'm going to think about it very carefully," I said, meaning every word. As we finished clearing the table together, my mind was already working. December 29th at 4 o'clock. 4 days to consider their demand. 4 days to decide how to respond to 35 years of raising a daughter who thought love could be purchased with ultimatums. The Christmas lights twinkled in the living room, but I was no longer seeing holiday decorations. I was seeing possibilities, options, strategies. 4 days was plenty of time to think, and thinking, as any successful businessman knows, was just the first step in a much larger process. Sleep had been elusive. I'd sent Tommy home around 10, promising him we'd talk more soon, then spent hours in my office staring at the Christmas debt papers spread across my desk. The numbers hadn't changed, but my perspective had crystallized with each passing hour. Dawn crept through the blinds as I sat surrounded by the artifacts of my business life. Awards from the Austin Chamber of Commerce. Photos with satisfied customers at my dealerships. The framed $1 bill from my very first car sale in 1982. Each memento reminded me of the principles that had built my success: integrity, accountability, and consequences for poor decisions. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but the legal pad in front of me was covered with notes, questions that needed answers, connections that needed exploring. The businessman in me had taken over from the hurt father, and that meant approaching this situation like any other complex negotiation. Victor Stone. The name had haunted Mark's expression yesterday evening. In Austin's business community, Stone Investment Group carried weight. I'd heard the name at chamber meetings, seen it in the business journal. Private equity, hard money loans, the kind of investor who didn't play games with deadbeat debtors. I reached for my phone and dialed Tom Brown's office number. Tom had been my lawyer for 15 years, handling everything from dealership contracts to my estate planning. If anyone understood Texas lawsuit procedures, it was Tom. "Robert?" Tom's familiar voice carried concern. "Everything all right? It's barely 8 in the morning." "Tom, I need some information about private debt collection in Texas." I kept my voice steady, professional. "Specifically, what happens when someone defaults on a private investment loan?" A pause. "This wouldn't have anything to do with your son-in-law, would it? I heard some rumors around town about a failed startup." Austin's business community was smaller than most people realized. Of course, Tom had heard whispers about Mark's troubles. "What kind of rumors?" "Nothing specific, just that Mark Johnson got in over his head with some private investors, borrowed against projected revenue that never materialized." Tom's tone grew more serious. "Robert, tell me you didn't co-sign anything for him." "No." I stared at the scattered papers. "But he owes $250,000 to someone named Victor Stone. And yesterday my daughter handed me the bill as a Christmas present." The silence on Tom's end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally he spoke. "Victor Stone? Robert, that man doesn't mess around. He's legitimate, but he expects his money back, on time, with interest." "What's his reputation?" "Fair but ruthless. He'll work with you if you communicate and make good faith efforts. But if you try to hide from him or play games," Tom's voice trailed off meaningfully, "he has resources for tracking down debtors, and Texas law is very friendly to creditors." I made more notes on my legal pad. "How long does he typically give someone before filing suit?" Depends on the terms of the original agreement, but usually 90 days past due date. After that, he can pursue garnishment, asset seizure, all the legal remedies available. 3 months. Mark had been hiding for 1 month already. That left, perhaps, 8 weeks, before Victor Stone's patience ran out entirely. Tom, I need you to research something for me. Quietly. I set down my pen and focused entirely on the conversation. Find out everything you can about Stone Investment Group's current legal proceedings, specifically anything involving Mark Johnson. Robert, Tom's voice carried warning, whatever you're thinking, be careful. Victor Stone isn't someone you want as an enemy. Who says I want him as an enemy? By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my desk looked like a war room. Tom's research had arrived by email an hour earlier, confirming what I'd suspected. Victor Stone had already begun preliminary legal proceedings against Mark. Default notices, demand letters. The machinery of debt collection was already in motion. My other phone calls had been equally productive. Jim Porter, my business partner from the early days of building the dealership network, had provided valuable intelligence about Stone's character and methods. Fair but implacable. A man who respected straight dealing but had zero tolerance for deception. The sound of my front door opening interrupted my planning. Tommy's voice called out from the hallway. "Grandpa, you said I could come by this afternoon." "In here, Tommy." I quickly gathered the most sensitive documents, sliding them into a folder. My grandson didn't need to see all the details of what I was considering. Tommy appeared in the doorway, taking in the scattered papers and business cards with curious eyes. "You've been busy. This looks like when you're planning something big for the dealerships. Sharp kid. Too sharp for his own good sometimes. Sit down, Tommy. I want to ask you something." He settled into the chair across from my desk, his expression serious. "Is this about Mom and Dad?" "It's about right and wrong." I leaned back, studying his face. "When someone makes a bad decision and it hurts other people, what should happen?" Tommy considered the question with the gravity I'd come to expect from him. They should face the consequences. Make it right, somehow. Even if making it right is difficult, even if it means they might be uncomfortable or embarrassed. Especially then, his answer came without hesitation. Otherwise, they'll just keep making bad decisions, right? Because they know someone else will always clean up their mess, out of the mouths of babes. And what if the person who usually cleans up the mess decides to stop helping? Tommy's eyes brightened with understanding. Then maybe they'll finally learn to be responsible for themselves. He paused, then added quietly, "Is that what you're planning to do?" I studied my grandson, this 16-year-old, who grasped concepts that seemed to elude his parents. "What would you think if I told you I was going to help the man your father owes money to find him?" The question hung in the air between us. Tommy's expression cycled through surprise, consideration, and finally something that looked like approval. "You mean instead of just giving them the money? Instead of enabling their irresponsibility? Yes." Tommy nodded slowly. "That would teach them something. Giving them money would just teach them that manipulation works." "It might be hard for them, embarrassing. Your father could face legal consequences." "Grandpa," Tommy said with remarkable maturity, "sometimes the right thing to do isn't the easy thing to do." I smiled at him, proud of the young man he was becoming. "Your parents won't see it that way." "My parents see everything through the lens of what's convenient for them." The bitterness in his voice surprised me. "Maybe it's time they learned that actions have consequences." I pulled out a business card from the stack on my desk. Victor Stone's contact information obtained through my morning research. "I'm going to call this man tomorrow. Arrange a meeting." Tommy leaned forward to read the card. "What will you tell him?" "The truth, that I know where Mark is hiding, that I believe he should face his responsibilities, and that I'd like to be present when those responsibilities catch up with him." "Will he listen to you?" "Men like Victor Stone respect other men who honor their commitments. I think we'll understand each other just fine." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he looked up at me with determination in his eyes. "Do you want me to be there?" "When it happens, I mean. For moral support." The offer touched me more than I could express. "No, Tommy. This is something I need to handle myself, but knowing you understand, that means everything." I reached across the desk and squeezed his shoulder. Tomorrow I would make the call that would set everything in motion. Tonight I had the approval of the one family member whose opinion truly mattered. The elevator in the downtown Austin office building carried me to the 15th floor with smooth efficiency. I'd spent the morning preparing for this meeting like any other crucial business negotiation. Research compiled, talking points organized, potential objections anticipated. The fact that this involved my own family made it more personal, but not less professional. Stone Investment Group occupied half the floor, their reception area decorated with understated elegance that spoke of serious money and serious business. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with shrewd eyes, had checked my identification carefully before announcing my arrival. "Mr. Stone will see you now, Mr. Clark." Victor Stone's office commanded an impressive view of Lady Bird Lake. The man himself stood behind an executive desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, but his attention was entirely focused on me, rather than trying to impress with his surroundings. "Mr. Clark," he offered a firm handshake. "I have to admit, when you called yesterday asking to discuss Mark Johnson, I was curious. Please, have a seat." Stone looked exactly like I'd imagined. Late 40s, silver at his temples, the kind of bearing that comes from making difficult decisions for a living. His suit was expensive, but not flashy. Everything about his office suggested competence and success. "Mr. Stone, I'll be direct with you. My son-in-law owes you a substantial amount of money, and my family believes I should simply write a check to make his problems disappear." Stone's eyebrows raised slightly. "And you don't agree with that approach?" "I think Mark needs to learn responsibility, and my daughter needs to understand that she can't manipulate people to solve problems she didn't create." For the first time since I'd entered his office, Stone smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, but it carried approval. "Mr. Clark, in 20 years of private lending, I've dealt with dozens of family members. Usually they want to know how little they can pay to make me go away. $250,000 is serious money. Your son-in-law knew the risks when he signed those papers." Stone opened a file folder on his desk, scanning documents I recognized as Mark's loan agreements. He certainly did. Signed multiple guarantees, personal liability clauses. He understood exactly what he was agreeing to. "What's your normal procedure when someone defaults?" "Documentation, demand letters, legal proceedings if necessary." Stone closed the folder and studied me carefully, but Mr. Johnson has been creative in avoiding service of process. "Meaning?" "He's moved out of his listed address, changed his phone number. His business office is closed. Finding him to serve papers has become time-consuming and expensive." I leaned forward slightly. "What if I told you I could save you that time and expense?" Stone's expression sharpened with interest. "I'm listening. I can tell you exactly where Mark is hiding, his new address, his current phone number, even his daily routine." I paused, letting the value of that information sink in. "In exchange, I want to be present when you serve him with papers." "Present how?" "I want him to understand that his actions have consequences, and I want my daughter to see what happens when you try to hide from your responsibilities instead of facing them." Stone was quiet for a long moment, considering my proposition. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Mr. Clark, that's the most interesting offer I've received in months. You're essentially volunteering to help me collect from your own family member. I'm volunteering to help teach my family about accountability. And you believe this approach will be more effective than simply paying his debt?" "Mr. Stone, if I pay this debt, Mark will learn that reckless decisions can be fixed by manipulation. My daughter will learn that emotional blackmail works. What lesson does that teach my grandson?" Stone's smile returned, this time with genuine warmth. "You're a man of principles, Mr. Clark. I respect that." He stood and extended his hand again. "I accept your proposal. When can we proceed?" "December 29th, 4 o'clock. My daughter is coming to my house to collect the money she's demanding. I suggest we provide her with more educational experience instead." Stone's handshake was firm and final. "Mr. Clark, I believe this partnership is going to be very productive." The CAF, near the legal district, buzzed with the quiet intensity of business professionals conducting important conversations. Victor and I had chosen a corner table away from the main flow of traffic, where we could discuss sensitive matters without being overheard. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across our documents and coffee cups. David Richards arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase that spoke of years of successful legal practice. Victor stood to greet his attorney, a man in his early 50s with the sharp eyes and measured demeanor of someone who specialized in commercial debt collection. "David, this is Robert Clark," Victor said, making the introduction. "Robert, David Richards has been handling my legal matters for over a decade. If there's a way to collect money legally in Texas, David knows it." Richards shook my hand with professional courtesy. "Mr. Clark, Victor tells me you have information that could expedite our proceedings against Mark Johnson." "I can tell you exactly where he'll be tomorrow at 4 o'clock, I said without preamble, "along with my daughter, who's been orchestrating this whole attempt to manipulate me into paying his debts." David opened his briefcase and withdrew a manila folder, thick with legal documents. "We can file the lawsuit within 24 hours. The key is proper service of documents. If Mr. Johnson continues to evade service, we'll have to pursue more expensive alternatives." "He won't be evading anything tomorrow." I leaned forward, sharing the details I'd kept to myself until now. "They'll come to my house at 4 o'clock. Mark will be with her. He never lets her handle money matters alone. Too nervous about confrontation to trust her with something this important." Victor's expression showed approval. "Perfect. We can position my team nearby, serve the papers right there." "What exactly does proper service require?" I asked Richards. "Physical delivery of documents to the defendant, verbal identification of the person being served, written verification of service completion." Richards consulted his notes. "Since we'll have clear identification and a controlled environment, there shouldn't be any procedural complications." Victor pulled out his phone, checking his calendar. "I can have 3 people there by 3:45. 1 to serve papers, 2 as witnesses and backup." "Tell me about Mark's typical behavior," Richards requested. "Does he have any patterns we should anticipate?" I thought about my son-in-law's nervous habits, his tendency to fidget when stressed. "He'll pace. Won't sit still when he's anxious. Probably stay near the door so he can leave quickly if things go badly. He's fundamentally a coward." "That actually works in our favor," Richards noted. "Flight risk behavior supports our urgency claims if we need to pursue immediate garnishment." Victor studied the papers in front of him. "I want him to understand the seriousness of this situation. Maybe seeing real consequences will teach him to think before taking other people's money." "What happens after service?" I asked. "He'll have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit," Richards explained. "During that time, we can pursue asset discovery, employment verification, all the standard collection procedures. Given the amount involved in his evasion attempts, we'll likely seek expedited judgment." The waitress refilled our coffee cups, providing a brief interruption to our planning. When she moved away, Victor leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. "Robert, I have to say this is the most cooperative family member I've ever encountered in a collection case." "I'm not thinking like a family member," I replied. "I'm thinking like a businessman who's tired of watching people avoid consequences for their poor decisions." Richards made final notes in his file. "We'll have all documentation ready by tomorrow morning. Service team briefed and positioned. Once the papers are delivered, Mr. Johnson will officially be in the legal system." "And there's no way he can claim he wasn't properly served?" "Not with 3 witnesses in a controlled environment," Richards confirmed. "This will be textbook proper service." Victor checked his watch. "I should coordinate with my team tonight. Robert, are you comfortable with everything we've discussed?" I nodded, feeling the satisfaction that comes from a well-planned strategy. "Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, my daughter is expecting to collect $250,000. Instead, she's going to learn what happens when you try to solve problems with manipulation." As we gathered our papers and prepared to leave, I felt the same calm confidence I'd experienced before major business negotiations. Every detail planned, every contingency considered, every person clear on their role. Tomorrow would be very educational for everyone involved. Morning light streamed through the windows of Tom Brown's law office as I signed the most significant legal document of my life. The notary, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Hoffman, watched carefully as I placed my signature on each page of the revised will. 40 years of building wealth and it had taken less than an hour to completely restructure how it would be distributed. "Robert, are you absolutely certain about these changes?" Tom asked for the third time. "This is a fundamental alteration to your estate planning." I set down the pen and looked at the documents spread before me. Melissa's inheritance, once substantial enough to secure her comfortable retirement, now reduced to a symbolic $1,000. Tommy's share increased dramatically, along with significant donations to 3 Austin charities that taught financial responsibility to young adults. Absolutely certain, someone who can blackmail their own father doesn't deserve to be rewarded for that behavior. Patricia stamped each page with official seals, her movements precise and professional. "The document is legally sound, Mr. Clark. Your wishes will be executed exactly as written, and the protective clauses will make any challenge extremely difficult." Tom gathered the signed pages, organizing them with practiced efficiency. "What about the personal letter you wanted to include?" I handed him the sealed envelope I'd prepared at home. Inside, 3 pages explained my reasoning to Melissa, expressing both my love for her and my disappointment in her choices. The letter offered hope for reconciliation, but only if she demonstrated genuine change in her character and behavior. "This needs to be stored with the original will?" "Yes. She should understand why these decisions were made, even if she disagrees with them." Patricia finished her notarial duties and began packing her seal and stamps. "Mr. Clark, I've been notarizing estate documents for 25 years. I've never seen someone make changes this significant without some form of family crisis motivating them." "There has been a crisis," I acknowledged, "just not the kind most people would recognize." Tom placed the completed documents in his office safe, the same secure location where my business contracts and other vital papers were stored. "Robert, when do you plan to tell Melissa about these changes?" "After tomorrow's meeting. Once she understands that manipulation doesn't work, she'll need to decide what kind of person she wants to be going forward." "And if she chooses to challenge the will legally?" I smiled, remembering the protective clauses Tom had crafted. "Then she'll discover that attempting to overturn a properly executed will is expensive, time-consuming, and rarely successful, especially when the testator was clearly of sound mind and had legitimate reasons for his decisions." Tom locked the safe and turned back to me. "Your grandson is going to be a very wealthy young man someday. Tommy has character. He understands right from wrong, responsibility from entitlement. He'll use the money wisely." I stood, feeling lighter despite the gravity of what I'd just done. Unlike his parents, he's learned that actions have consequences. What if Melissa changes? What if this experience teaches her the lessons you're hoping it will? Then the will can be changed again, but she'll have to prove that change through years of different behavior, not just words. As I prepared to leave, Tom handed me a copy of the revised will for my records. The weight of the document felt symbolic, both an ending of one relationship and the beginning of something else. "Robert, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Enabling bad behavior never helps anyone, even when it's family." I shook his hand, grateful for his support and expertise. "Thank you, Tom. Tomorrow we'll see if this approach produces the results I'm hoping for." Walking to my car, I felt the same sense of resolution that came after making difficult but necessary business decisions. The will would remain a secret until after tomorrow's confrontation, but knowing it existed gave me additional confidence in my approach. Melissa would learn that manipulation had consequences extending far beyond a single conversation. Some lessons, I reflected as I drove home, could only be taught through experience. The chessboard sat between Tommy and me on the coffee table, pieces arranged in the middle game positions that required careful thought and planning. Outside, Austin's December evening had settled into the comfortable coolness that made indoor conversations feel especially intimate. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and consequences, but tonight offered the peaceful rhythm of strategic thinking. "Your move, Grandpa." Tommy studied the board with intense concentration, trying to anticipate my next several moves. I moved my bishop to threaten his knight, creating the kind of pressure that forced immediate decisions. In chess, Tommy, every move creates consequences that ripple forward. You can't just react to immediate threats. You have to consider what happens 3 or 4 moves ahead. Tommy captured my bishop with his rook, but I could see he was already regretting the trade. Like what you're doing with Mom and Dad. Exactly like that. I moved my queen to a position that would create serious problems for his king within 2 moves. Your father made decisions without considering consequences. Your mother tried to manipulate me without thinking about how I might respond. Tomorrow, they'll discover that actions always have results. My phone rang, interrupting our game. Victor Stone's name appeared on the caller display, right on schedule for our planned coordination call. Victor, everything ready for tomorrow? Everything's in place. My people will be positioned near your house at 3:45. David has all the paperwork prepared and properly certified. Victor's voice carried professional satisfaction. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Confident. My daughter and son-in-law have no idea what's waiting for them. Tommy listened quietly, understanding that he was witnessing the final preparations for something significant. His expression showed approval rather than concern, confirming my belief that he grasped the moral complexity of the situation. And after service of papers, Victor continued, then we'll see how quickly they adjust to reality. Mark will have 30 days to respond to the lawsuit, but I suspect his first call will be to me, begging for help. Which you'll refuse, which I'll redirect toward personal responsibility. He created this problem. He needs to solve it. After ending the call, I returned my attention to Tommy and the chess game. He'd used my distraction to improve his position slightly, showing the kind of strategic thinking that would serve him well in life. Grandpa, what will happen to our family after tomorrow? I considered his question carefully, moving my knight to protect my queen while maintaining pressure on his position. That depends entirely on how your parents respond to consequences, Tommy. They can choose to learn from this experience and become better people, or they can choose to remain angry and entitled. And if they stay angry, then they'll have chosen their path, just like I've chosen mine. I gestured toward the chessboard. See how your knight is trapped now? You could sacrifice your queen to save it, or you could accept the loss and position yourself for a stronger endgame. Tommy studied the board, recognizing the parallel I was drawing. You're choosing the stronger endgame. I'm choosing to teach lessons that should have been learned years ago. We played in comfortable silence for several moves, the only sounds the soft click of chess pieces and the distant hum of evening traffic. The house felt peaceful, prepared for tomorrow's important visitors. I'd cleaned thoroughly, arranged furniture to ensure clear sightlines, even selected my clothing for the occasion. Tommy, regardless of what happens tomorrow or in the weeks that follow, I want you to remember something important. He looked up from contemplating his next move. What's that? Real love sometimes requires making difficult decisions. Enabling someone's bad behavior isn't helping them, it's hurting them, and hurting everyone around them. Like giving Dad money would hurt him? Exactly. It would teach him that irresponsibility can be fixed by manipulation. It would teach your mother that emotional blackmail works, and it would teach you that consequences don't apply to people you care about. Tommy nodded slowly, moving his queen to a defensive position, but this way they might actually learn something. This way they'll have the opportunity to learn. Whether they take that opportunity is up to them. As the evening grew later, Tommy helped me put away the chess set and prepare for tomorrow's events. His presence had provided exactly the moral grounding I'd needed, confirming that my approach was sound and my reasoning clear. I should head home, he said, gathering his jacket. Good luck tomorrow, Grandpa. It's not about luck, Tommy. It's about justice. After he left, I sat alone in my chair, looking at the clock that would tomorrow mark one of the most significant confrontations of my life. 4 o'clock would bring Melissa and Mark to my door, expecting money and accommodation. Instead, they would find consequences and education. The house felt ready. My allies were prepared. My conscience was clear. Tomorrow would change everything, and I was completely at peace with that reality. 4 o'clock approached with the precision of a well-orchestrated business meeting. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same position I'd occupied during the Christmas confrontation 4 days earlier. But now everything felt different. The room carried an electric anticipation that comes before momentous events, when months of planning converge into a single decisive moment. Through the front window, I could see Victor's dark sedan parked discreetly down the street. His team had positioned themselves at exactly 3:45, as planned, professional and invisible until needed. David Richards sat in the passenger seat, legal documents prepared and certified, ready to execute the most important service of process in my recent memory. My phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "In position. Ready when you are." I replied simply, "They'll be here any moment." The sound of car doors closing in my driveway announced their arrival. Melissa's confident stride on the walkway, Mark's hesitant shuffle behind her, exactly as I'd predicted to Victor. Some patterns never change, and my daughter's need to control situations while my son-in-law cowered in the background had become depressingly reliable. The doorbell rang. I counted to 5 before standing, allowing them to wait just long enough to feel the weight of what they believed was their moment of victory. When I opened the door, Melissa wore the triumphant smile of someone who thought she'd successfully manipulated her father into submission. "Hello, Dad. I hope you've thought this through and realized family is more important than principles." Her greeting carried the casual arrogance of someone expecting immediate capitulation. Mark stood behind her, fidgeting with his car keys, unable to meet my eyes directly. The nervous energy radiating from him suggested he understood, on some level, that this situation felt wrong. "I have thought about it very carefully," I replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "In fact, I have a surprise for you both." They moved into the living room, Melissa heading straight for the chair she'd occupied during Christmas dinner, Mark hovering near the doorway as if planning a quick escape. The same positioning I'd described to Victor during our strategic planning session. "Dad, we don't need surprises." Melissa settled into her chair with proprietary confidence. "We just need you to be reasonable about this situation. Mark's made some mistakes, but family helps family." Mark finally spoke, his voice carrying desperate hope. "Mr. Clark, I know you're angry, but I promise I'll pay you back. With interest. I just need time to—" "To what, Mark?" I remained standing, maintaining the psychological advantage of height. "To find another investor to cheat? To start another failed company with someone else's money?" "It wasn't cheating." Mark's voice cracked with desperation. "The business model was sound. We just needed more runway to reach profitability." Melissa shot her husband a warning look, then turned back to me with renewed manipulation tactics. "Dad, you're making this unnecessarily complicated. It's $250,000. You spend more than that on advertising for the dealerships every year." "The amount isn't the issue, Melissa." "Then what is the issue? Why are you being so stubborn about helping your own family?" Before I could answer, the sound of car doors closing outside drew everyone's attention. Mark moved toward the window, then froze as he recognized the figures approaching my front door. "No." His face went white. "No, no, no." The doorbell rang again, this time with the authoritative persistence of someone conducting official business. "Expecting someone else, Dad?" Melissa asked, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. I smiled, feeling the satisfaction that comes when a carefully orchestrated plan reaches its climax. "Actually, yes. I told you I had a surprise." The doorbell rang a third time. Mark pressed himself against the living room wall, shaking his head in denial. "Mark Johnson?" Victor Stone's voice carried through the front door with professional clarity. "Finally found you." I walked to the front door with deliberate calm, while Mark pressed himself against the living room wall, like a cornered animal. Melissa's confusion was evident as she looked between her panicking husband and my controlled demeanor, finally beginning to sense that something had gone very wrong with her carefully planned manipulation. "Victor, please come in." I opened the door wide, allowing Victor Stone and his associate to enter with official documentation visible in their hands. "I believe you know Mark Johnson." Victor stepped into my living room with the measured confidence of a man conducting routine business. His gray suit and professional bearing created an immediate contrast with Mark's obvious terror and Melissa's growing outrage. "Mr. Johnson, you've been quite difficult to locate." Victor's voice carried no emotion, just the flat tone of someone completing a necessary task. "I have legal documents that require your immediate attention." "This is set up." Mark's voice cracked as he pointed at me with a shaking finger. "You arranged this." "How could you do this?" Melissa erupted from her chair, her face flushed with rage. "You sold out your own daughter to this man." I didn't sell you out, Melissa. I remained standing by the door, watching my family's reaction to consequences they'd never anticipated. I taught you that every action has results. Victor approached Mark with legal papers extended, his associate flanking to prevent any escape attempt. Mr. Johnson, you owe me $250,000, plus accumulated interest. This lawsuit is your official court summons. The investment was legitimate, Mark's voice rose to near hysteria. The AI startup had real potential. You can't sue me for taking a calculated business risk. I can sue you for defaulting on a loan with personal guarantees. Victor's tone remained professionally neutral, which you signed, multiple times, with full understanding of the terms. Melissa whirled toward me, her earlier confidence completely shattered. Dad, how long have you been planning this? How long have you been lying to your own daughter? I haven't lied about anything. I moved to my armchair, sitting down to observe the confrontation I'd orchestrated. I promised to think about your demand. I thought about it very carefully. And you decided to betray your own family. I decided to stop enabling irresponsible behavior. My voice carried the authority I'd used in difficult business negotiations. Mark borrowed money he couldn't repay. You tried to manipulate me into fixing his mistakes. Both of you need to learn that actions have consequences. Victor handed the legal documents to Mark, who took them with trembling hands. You have 30 days to respond to this lawsuit, Mr. Johnson. I suggest you find competent legal representation. This is all wrong. Mark clutched the papers like they might bite him. Mr. Clark, you said you'd think about helping. You said you understood family obligations. I do understand obligations, Mark. Your obligation to repay the money you borrowed. Your obligation to face the consequences of your poor decisions instead of hiding behind your wife. Now you can prove your business model was sound in court, I continued, like a responsible adult facing the results of his choices. Melissa's fury reached its peak as she realized the full scope of what had happened. You planned this whole thing. You knew exactly what you were going to do when we left here Christmas night. I knew I wasn't going to reward manipulation with money. Everything else developed from that principle. Victor checked his watch with professional efficiency. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, my business here is complete. The legal process will proceed according to Texas law. What happens now? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Now you face the consequences of your decisions, I answered before Victor could respond. You borrowed money from a legitimate investor. You failed to repay it as agreed. You tried to hide from your obligations. The legal system will determine what happens next. Victor moved toward the door, his associate following. Mr. Clark, thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Thank you for being reasonable about the repayment process, Victor. As the door closed behind them, Melissa and Mark stood in my living room like survivors of a natural disaster. The confident daughter who'd arrived expecting easy money was gone, replaced by someone beginning to understand that her manipulation tactics had catastrophic limitations. Dad! Melissa's voice carried a note I'd never heard before. Not anger, not entitlement, but something approaching recognition. Yes? What happens to us now? I looked at my daughter and son-in-law, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in years. That depends entirely on what you choose to learn from this experience. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of our usual cafe in downtown Austin as Tommy and I settled into our regular corner table. Our weekly coffee meetings had become a cherished routine since the December confrontation, providing space for the kind of conversations that help young men understand complex adult realities. Grandpa, how are things with Mom and Dad now? Tommy stirred his coffee with the thoughtful precision he'd inherited from his grandfather's side of the family. Better than I expected, honestly. I smiled, thinking about the gradual thaw that had occurred over the past months. Mark is paying back the debt in installments. Victor turned out to be more reasonable than anyone imagined. The legal proceedings had unfolded exactly as David Richards predicted. Mark had hired a competent attorney who quickly advised him that fighting the lawsuit would be expensive and futile. Victor, demonstrating the fairness that had built his business reputation, offered a structured payment plan that allowed Mark to avoid bankruptcy while taking full responsibility for his obligations. Is Dad working now? He found a position with a software consulting firm. Nothing glamorous, but steady income with the potential for growth. I sipped my coffee, reflecting on how quickly Mark had adjusted to accountability once he stopped looking for escape routes. Amazing what people can accomplish when they stop expecting others to fix their problems. And Mom? That question carried more complexity. Melissa is still angry, but she called for the first time yesterday. Maybe she's finally starting to understand. The phone call had been brief and awkward, but it represented the first crack in the wall of resentment she'd built since December. No apologies yet, no acknowledgement of her manipulation tactics, but a tentative inquiry about my health that suggested some recognition of relationship damage that needed repair. "Will you forgive her?" Tommy asked with the directness that made these conversations so valuable. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Tommy. It's the chance to start over when someone truly understands their mistakes. I met his eyes across the table. Your mother needs to demonstrate that she's learned something before we can rebuild trust. What about the will? Will you change it back? But I told Tommy about the inheritance modifications the week after the confrontation, feeling he deserved to understand the full scope of what had transpired. His reaction had been mature beyond his years, concern for family healing rather than excitement about his financial future. If your mother shows genuine change over time, yes, but it will take more than apologies. It will require years of different behavior. Tommy nodded thoughtfully, like Dad having to actually pay back the money instead of just promising to. Exactly like that. Actions matter more than words. The CAF bustled with the lunch crowd. Business professionals, students from UT, families enjoying the pleasant April weather. Austin's spring energy felt hopeful, reflecting the gradual improvements in my family situation. "Grandpa, do you think what you did was right? Looking back, I mean." I considered his question carefully, appreciating his willingness to engage with moral complexity. I think enabling bad behavior would have been wrong. Teaching consequences was difficult, but necessary. Even though it hurt them, sometimes the people we love most need to experience the results of their choices, not as punishment, but as education. I reached across the table to squeeze his shoulder. Your parents are better people today because they faced reality instead of being rescued from it. Tommy was quiet for several minutes, processing the life lessons embedded in our family's recent history. Finally, he looked up with understanding in his eyes. "You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. That's what integrity means, Tommy. Doing the right thing regardless of the cost." As we prepared to leave, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from seeing principles validated by results. Mark was employed and making payments. Melissa was beginning to question her behavior. Tommy had witnessed the importance of accountability and personal responsibility. The confrontation in December had been painful but necessary. 4 months later, the family wounds were beginning to heal, not through enabling or forgetting, but through the honest work of acknowledging mistakes and building better relationships. "Same time next week?" Tommy asked as we stood to go. "Wouldn't miss it. These conversations are the best part of my week." Walking to our cars, I reflected on the difference between love that enables and love that teaches. The second type requires more courage, but it builds stronger people and healthier relationships. 4 months ago, I'd made the hardest decision of my parenting life. Today, watching Tommy grow into a man of character while his parents slowly learned to take responsibility for their choices, I knew it had been the right choice. Justice, I discovered, often looks exactly like love, when you're brave enough to let it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.